You've seen Deadlock in action and you have witnessed her disruptive abilities. You've probably even experimented with her unique playstyle. Yet, as the agent roster in Valorant grows, so too does the sea of guides, tips, and tutorials. And you might be asking, what makes this guide any different? The answer is simple. While other creators are focusing on teaching you the niche jump boost spots and how to block off the spike with Deadlock's barrier mesh, our mission is a little different. We're not just here to teach you the basics or show you some cool tricks that you're never going to use in game. We're going to show you how to win rounds and games against high-skilled players. In this guide, we will delve into the unique playstyle that Deadlock players should adopt. We'll be pulling apart what sets her apart from the other Sentinels and why playing her differently will lead to your victory. We're all about providing substantial, actionable advice that stands the test of time. This guide is not just about Deadlock today or Deadlock tomorrow. It's about understanding her role, potential, and gameplay depth that will stay relevant whether you are watching this now or months from down the line. So are you ready to master Deadlock and dominate the game in ways that you never thought possible? Let's dive in. Let's start with Deadlock's most iconic ability, Barrier Mesh. This unique ability is handed to Deadlock for free each round, and it's a real game changer. This isn't just a barrier, it is a wall that takes a significant number of bullets to break. Imagine a determined player trying to break it down during a pistol round. It's going to take a bit. Even with rifles, it's going to take quite a few bullets to take it down, so you can definitely make your opponent's life a bit inconvenient with this one. However, at first glance, you might think that Barrier Mesh is similar to Sage's Barrier Orb, which is true. It can be used to block off entrances, but it's important to note the unique properties that sets it apart. This mesh lets you shoot bullets through it, which means it is an amazing tool for blocking off common routes that enemies might take on sight and setting up kills. Say for example you use Barrier Mesh to block off a choke point. It's similar to if you wall mid on Sage and the enemies shoot it down right away. If you use this ability to stop a rush, they're just going to burst it down and they'll run straight through. And on top of that, they can even shoot back at you if they can see you, so it's not really as good for stopping pushes. On the surface, this is what most players are going to use it for, but there is actually so much more value that you can get out of it if you're strategic. Keep in mind the unique property of Barrier Mesh is that you can shoot through it. This makes it so it's not really great for hiding behind the same way that you might use a Sage wall. Because of this, you might want to be selective of when you choose to wall and what you choose to wall. For example, using Barrier Mesh to wall off tree on ascent might not be the best idea, considering enemies could still see through it and spam you if you're walking in. It can be great to halt a swing out of tree if you need to, but other less valuable utility can accomplish the same task, such as a molly or even a Gravnet. Instead, you might favor using it to wall off heaven when it's more difficult for them to get a good sightline onto sight. Or on Pearl, using Barrier Mesh to block off art when pushing A probably isn't the best, but this is a location that Sage players are likely to wall. Not to say that it's never usable in this position, but you'll probably only want to if you're really worried about players swinging through this smoke. Basically, a good rule of thumb is to use Barrier Mesh to block pathways that you don't want players to push through, but they also can't really see you through. For example, take a look at how great this Barrier Mesh fits into Connector on art. Players can't really swing out to help all that much, so they can't flank from here, and they can't get a good angle from here, so it makes this position virtually useless. So if you're Deadlock and you're looking to split A, this might be something to add to your arsenal. When it comes to setting up traps though, Barrier Mesh pairs wonderfully with other abilities, especially considering projectiles can travel through it freely. Imagine this, Deadlock's Barrier Mesh coupled with a paint shells and maybe one of your tripwires. What do you get? An absolute blender that will give your enemies nightmares. Even beyond those death traps, Barrier Mesh can provide you the security to rotate by blocking off choke points effectively. Especially considering Deadlock's tripwires require sound to activate and enemies might just sneak right past them, it's a pretty great idea to make use of Barrier Mesh to block off choke points when needed, similar to how you would use a Sage wall. If you want to rotate and it's later in the round, you might be worried about a lurk. In this case, probably best not to rely on these faulty trips and just throw down your Barrier Mesh to cover the entrance as you rotate. The same thing can be done to hold down a potential split on sight. You can use Barrier Mesh to block off one side while you fight the other. But we will dive more into our tripwires a bit later. For now, remember that Barrier Mesh is not just a tool, it's a weapon in itself. The ability, however, that probably piqued your interest in Deadlock is her devastating ultimate, Annihilation. It's a real game changer and one of the few ultimates in Valorant that can straight up eliminate opponents. With Annihilation, if an enemy is caught and not freed by their teammates within the time limit, it will, annihilate the target. It will kill them. Sure, teammates can shoot the cocoon to liberate the entrapped player, but it's not as straightforward as it seems. Opening fire on the cocoon exposes them, making them very vulnerable to fire themselves, which makes Annihilation a potent tool for clutch situations. The player will be forced between freeing their teammate or taking a 1v1 with you, which in a 2v1 isn't really a great option anyway. However, it's crucial to remember that Annihilation can only grab one enemy, so it loses some of its luster when facing multiple opponents. That's why the timing of this ultimate is critical. To maximize Annihilation's value, try to use it when the enemy team is thin on numbers. A couple of players will have a harder time dealing with this than a full squad. If it's just one player trying to free their teammate, it's going to be pretty deadly when you swing to get the trade. However, if it's a full team, not only are they going to break their teammate out real fast, if you swing into 4 people all looking at you, you're probably going to die anyway. Because of this, generally you'd want to use the ultimate later in the round, similar to a Cypher or Viper's ultimate. But don't let that limit you. If you know the enemy's early round patterns, you can snag some surprising kills. We're going to go more in depth on how to use Annihilation at the end of the video, but for now, just know that you can and should be bouncing this ability off of walls whenever possible. Directly facing an enemy when deploying your ultimate is a risk that you want to avoid. Just take a look at this round where Deadlock nearly pays a heavy price for not following this advice. However, if you must peek the enemy with your ultimate out, we recommend using it with a jump peek just to make it a little bit more safe. The other thing to keep in mind is that even if the enemies free their teammate, it's not like the ultimate did nothing. If it drags them far enough, they'll oftentimes be in such a bad position that it's irrecoverable anyway. If you drag somebody out into the open in front of your entire team, they're pretty much done for. There's no doubt that Deadlock's Annihilation is a unique and potent tool, but like every weapon, it's all about how and when you choose to use it. Speaking of Annihilation, by the way, over at SkillCapped, we crafted up some of the best lineups that you can find for how to use this ultimate right out the gate to get free kills. If you're maybe not as savvy and don't exactly know where you should be using it, we will help you figure that out real fast and get you ahead of the competition in no time. We've already gone through all of the maps and found all of the best setups for Deadlock so that you don't need to worry about it. If you don't have a ton of time to play Valorant, don't spend your time struggling with the new agent when you could just get to the part where you're destroying people immediately. And that's kind of what we do here at SkillCapped. We get players caught up faster than the speed of light by teaching them everything that we've learned in the past 3 years of playing Valorant. Collectively, we have tens of thousands of hours on our team ready to teach you everything that there is to know about climbing in Valorant. On top of that, our entire site is backed by rank up insurance, so if you don't improve, you don't pay. Looking to master Deadlock today and impress your friends with all the free kills you're going to get? Check out SkillCapped using the link below, and we will see you there. Now let's move on to one of Deadlock's more intriguing abilities, Sonar Sensor. This ability is akin to a tripwire, much like Cypher's trips or Killjoy's alarm bot, but there's a significant difference. Sonic Sensor only triggers when enemies make noise within its range. This means that Sonic Sensor does not make an effective flank guard. It is really easy for enemies to take advantage of the sound requirement by just walking while they flank, so there's not really any room to rely on it in a high elo setting. The key to understanding Deadlock is realizing that her playstyle is different from that of a Cypher, Killjoy, or even Sage. Rather than spreading your Sonic Sensors across the map, your goal on defense is to set them up in high traffic areas where enemies are likely to make noise. Then you or your teammates should stay nearby to capitalize on the Sonic Sensors detections, because remember, leaving the area may not provide the necessary intel. Typically, this means placing Sonic Sensors on sites where players will make noise as they execute, but you can also set them up in common choke points such as tree on Ascent or street on Pearl. Once again, to reiterate, there should be a player in the area who is capable of playing off of these tripwires to get maximum value, because you cannot rely on their information. With Deadlock, however, the defensive strategy might feel familiar to most Sentinel players. Although you can't distribute her utility widely for info as well, you can still devise some ingenious site holds similar to a Cypher or Killjoy blender setup. On offense, Deadlock's role closely mirrors Sage. The plan is simple: get onto site and make it incredibly difficult for the defenders to retake. Setting up Sonic Sensors on site, using barrier mesh to hold back any pushes, and applying her stunning ability that we will discuss next, Deadlock can turn any site into a fortress. Cypher may be the king of watching flanks, but Deadlock, she is all about turning sites into nightmares for your enemies to retake or push into. Some key things to note about Sonic Sensor: enemies can hear this ability within 10 meters of it, so if you're walking by, they will likely be aware of it. Because of this, it's not best to place this in entrances, but rather right outside of the entrance where enemies will likely start running. The other thing is, it takes a moment for these abilities to go off, so if the enemy is fast, such as jet dashing or neon sprinting, they can run right by it. From our tests, if enemies are bunny hopping, they will be able to run right by it. However, if they are just running, they will get caught every time, assuming that they weren't walking initially into it. Finally, keep in mind that this ability can stun both yourself as well as allies. So if you're placing a trap, Try not to place it directly next to yourself. Because of these limitations, we like to place sonic sensors on sites where we think that jets might dash into to give us a very likely chance of messing up their push. You can also place these along the common paths that you think enemies will walk when entering site to make it really easy to set up kills. If you're not sure about the common pathing on a particular site, we recommend loading into a custom game and just trying to think about how you would enter the site. What feels safest and what feels most comfortable. Chances are your intuition will be pretty accurate to what most players feel comfortable. This is how you're going to find the most value with Deadlock's abilities. We have finally arrived at Deadlock's last ability though, Gravnet. For this, you might think of abilities like Fade's Seize or Sage's Slow Orb when you first see it. Gravnet locks players into a crouching animation, and the only way that they can break free is by holding F, the same way that you would remove a Cypher camera tag. I guess not the only way, the alternative way is that they wait a very long time. So because of this, you can see how if it was paired with abilities like paint shells or mollies, it could get maximum damage. Gravnet is a formidable tool in Deadlock's arsenal. It's incredibly annoying for your opponents and will significantly limit their movement. And remember, just like Sonic Sensor, it can affect you and your allies, so be cautious when using it. But don't underestimate Gravnet's power. Enemies hit by Gravnet will be stuck in place, making them very easy targets. Treat Gravnet as you would a Sage's Slow Orb. On defense, it can be used to halt a push or to disrupt a site take. Gravnet coupled with Annihilation are two of Deadlock's most potent retake tools. On offense, Gravnet can provide a lot of control. Toss it into a smoke to prevent enemies from swinging out of it. This is what we mentioned using in place of barrier mesh to stop enemies from swinging through smokes. Gravnet's whole purpose is to stop players from doing things like this, whereas barrier mesh has a lot of other uses that can be more valuable. You may even want to learn some lineups to hit key locations on site. If that's your type of thing, something that's helpful to know is that Gravnet has the same trajectory as a Viper's smoke orb. So you can learn a lineup on Viper using the minimap indicator and customs, and then switch to Deadlock to test it out after. Also, another pro tip for you on offense. If you still have Gravnet available, wait for enemies to use utility during a retake, and then toss it. Enemies will normally use some form of utility before running out for retake, so you can often use this as a trigger for when you should counter with your own abilities. This will disrupt their retake as soon as it starts, spoiling their utility and oftentimes separating players from each other. In the right hands, Gravnet is an incredibly strong tool, and although it may feel underwhelming to use at times, your enemies will definitely be frustrated when hit by it. Finally though, let's break down a few rounds of Deadlock being played effectively on offense, because for most players, that's going to be their biggest question. When playing the Sentinel role, generally you're going to be expected to hold flank, but if Deadlock isn't great at watching flanks, how exactly are you supposed to play her? In this round, we're going to be taking a look at Derek and how he expertly was able to use Deadlock's utility to fill his team's needs.
Dude, Derek is that. Are you kidding me?
Barrier deployed.
She's totally ace.
Got him.
Oh my god. 3v1, but you're.
Like just gonna heaven.
Chill, just fine. He's out, he's doing the smoke.
To start out the round, you'll notice his team is full committing onto a site and they do not plan to rotate out. In the past this game, his team was having issues holding flank, so Derek is actually going to use his barrier mesh to block off flank. This isn't something that we recommend doing. You'll probably get yelled at if you do this in your lobbies, and your pushes are far less likely to work than Derek's are because the players that he's playing with are going to be a lot better at committing to sites. However, in this case, it does fill the role of tripwires for his team. I'm basically only mentioning this to showcase that barrier mesh can fill the place of a tripwire when needed. This would be much better showcased on defense to block off a choke point while you rotate to another site, but it can still be shown here where Derek uses it to block flank. Generally, we recommend not boxing yourself in, but when desperate, this is always an option. As soon as Derek's team starts to scale up long though, they get into a fight, and he's quick to pop Annihilation to snag his team their first kill. We mentioned earlier that Annihilation is best used when numbers are dwindled down, but in this case, it's so early in the round that the defenders are likely pretty spread out right now. If Derek were able to grab one of the players here on site, he will essentially instantly set his team up with a kill, and he has a specific idea of where he is going to ult, so this is a great opportunity for him to get a kill. Sure enough, he lands a tag onto the enemy Sova, instantly pulling him out of position. This is what we were talking about earlier. Just because Sova's teammates broke him out doesn't necessarily mean that he's suddenly saved. He is now in a position that is completely irrecoverable and is essentially dead. Along with this, since his teammates were trying to save him, they were also caught out in the open and traded out as well. Because of this ultimate, Derek's team picks up 3 kills at the very start of the round. which essentially means that this round is over as long as there are no heroics from the remaining defenders. Finally, as Derek is running into site to prepare for the post plant, he lobs Gravnet into the spawn smoke to stop any retaking defenders coming in to help, and then he places a sonic sensor just in case anyone swings. While attempting to plant though, his jet calms that the Omen had walked out, so Derek double swings with his jet to trade out the kill, and then they win the round. Notice how Derek's playstyle is very aggressive with Deadlock. He's not just sitting back and waiting for enemies to come to him, he is playing relatively aggressively despite playing a Sentinel with a fairly passive kit. Remember, if your goal is to set up on site, you have to get onto site first, and Derek does an excellent job of assisting his team with that in this clip. But let's go back to this barrier mesh usage, because I think it's important to talk about for all of you lower elo players. We don't recommend doing this because more than likely what is going to happen in your games is that you're all going to run up through short, get smoked or mollied, and not really know how to get into site. If you can't get into site and you've blocked off your only escape, things are going to get pretty bad pretty fast. Instead, what you might favor is having a player on your team lurk mid to try and cut off any flankers and give your team more options. Although you can easily break one of the corners of the barrier mesh with your team to rotate out, it's such a powerful ability that you would really like to use it on site if you can, rather than using it to block off your own rotations. Here's another good round from Derek on offense to showcase what Deadlock's utility may look like when used well.
Okay, well.
3.
Let's go make noise mid. I stay B main and then we catch a wall later.
Blinded.
Good push.
Good push A.
They needed and molly. Good push for our spot.
Can you catch a wall for us?
Reyna as well, that's 4.
I have wall.
Wall, go.
Did you late look for me? Oh, that shit.
He's gonna run through.
Sound sensor.
Flashing through the wall, flashing through.
Down. No surprise. Light planted. Clean kill.
Dude, Eric is nasty. Someone sign this guy.
They're done.
Notice how Derek starts out the round by throwing Gravnet towards the B main tunnel entrance for defenders. If anyone is peeking this, they should be hit by Gravnet and stuck in place. This is a common tactic that high elo players will use to punish early swings. Generally, if you want to take control of an area, you want to use some form of utility to make it safe to scale up, and this does a great job of clearing out that entrance so that they can't be swung as they walk forward. After some shenanigans in mid, his team decides that they are ready to execute into B, and they use Astral Divide to separate the walkout for them. Derek then throws his barrier mesh on the close walk-in by Nubox so that nobody can swing out close to them, similar to how you might use a Sage Wall. And then he places 2 sonic sensors, one on either side of the pillar, to give them some sort of protection as he goes for the plant. He's aware that enemies might look to fight while he's planting, but these trips give him just a little bit of security, even if they are to get shot before activating. This gives him just enough time to get the plant off and reposition. Derek then holds the Astral Wall, picking up a kill for himself, and then swings the wall at the same time as his Reyna to kill the remaining player who he knows is Rafters due to the comms from his mid lurk. Although this isn't the craziest round, it does a good job of showcasing how you can use Deadlock's utility throughout the round. He used Gravnet to stop a swing as he scaled up, he used Barrier Mesh to protect his team from their sides, and then he used Sonic Sensors to protect him from each choke. Alright though, there is one last tactic I want to show you guys from Deadlock on offense that I think is super important. This round isn't going to end in a win, but it showcases something that is important for all players to see.
Here.
Boom, boom, boom.
Enemy spotted. A.
Alright, I'll take care of flank, guys. Don't worry.
Deploying drone.
I can flash short for you whenever you want. Could be in short.
It's Deadlock.
There's a lot of here.
You guys go make noise mid, I'm staying.
Gotta clear mid.
On me with a classic. Dead.
A C player.
Sounds like they're leaving A.
I'll ult back.
Wait, Jet's already.
Barrier deployed.
Hey, what gun do you have, Vandal?
I can smoke spawn in a sec. Or I'll fuck Evan. Wait.
Listening.
Oh, Silver's out mid. Walling her flame.
2 spawns.
He's gonna have a Vandal.
Throwing net.
So home heaven, I have flash up for
All
spawn.
3 spawn, you said?
No,
Flash off
2.
front, flash off front, Lord bot.
Okay.
Sensor tripped.
Spawn and spawn, coming out right now. no.
Notice how in this round, Derek's team starts out by pushing towards A site, similar to the first one that we looked at. His team takes some good space long, but gets smoked off, and just as we said earlier, this is generally the reason you don't want to wall off your own flank. Derek's team can either push through the smoke, which normally isn't a great idea, or they can rotate out and try to make noise elsewhere. In this case, Derek wants his team to go elsewhere and make noise so that he can look for an opening in A to find a pick. Deadlock is a great agent for lurking like this because she's not especially good on execute. Although she has a great post plan and you can use her Gravnet and barrier mesh to stop swings, Deadlock doesn't really provide a ton of utility that is fundamental to an execute. She doesn't play smokes, she doesn't give information, and she doesn't have a flash. She is pretty much only great at post plant, so it's actually not horrible for her to be lurking since her team doesn't exactly need her. Remember as well that lurking isn't something that is a solo task. Lurks are only as good as the pressure provided by their team. That's why you'll see Derek is waiting for his teammates to make noise in mid before he tries to make anything happen on A. This is why you'll see Derek wait specifically for his team to land their first kill in mid and start making noise before he starts walking up on A. This noise that his team created in mid ended up pulling players away from A, giving him the opportunity to walk in and look for a pick. Take notice how Derek is expecting at least one player to be here. He doesn't think that they just forgot about A site, it's just that they can't ignore what's going on in mid. This is how lurks like this work. His team pulls players away from A so that Derek can take a 1v1 on site, giving his team an opening. Sure enough, Derek gets a pick with this lurk and immediately moves to lock down the site for his team. He throws his barrier mesh towards spawn and sets up a sonar sensor to play off of when the defenders go for their retake. To stall even a bit longer, after they break his barrier mesh, Derek uses Gravnet to delay while his teammates rotate over. Then he communicates with his Omen to use paranoia off of his tripwire. Take note of how powerful this is. His tripwire gives info for the exact moment that Omen should be using his blind, reducing the room for error. There is no question of what should happen. Derek has given a trigger, which is his tripwire, and a response, which is the blind. Pro players simplify the game like this all of the time. Another example that we gave earlier is using your Gravnet off of the enemy's utility on the retake. So if you see a Reyna blind, that would be your trigger, and your response would be to use your Gravnet. Super easy. You can see this combo in action as Derek picks up a free kill in spawn, opening the door to make a really massive play in this round. Unfortunately, Derek ends up getting traded out right here, and his team will end up losing a close round. But this was some really awesome stuff that happened in this round, and you can definitely apply a lot of these same things in your rounds every single game. I hope this was helpful to showcase some of the insight into the playstyle of a Deadlock player on offense. Next, we're going to get into some really fun stuff though, Deadlock on defense. This is her playground and where many of you may feel most comfortable. Deadlock's defense has a way of being both very familiar, but also providing some new twists to really spice up the game. Take note of how this Deadlock sets up her sonar sensors on site in locations where if enemies were to run into site, they'd instantly be put into a blender. This is only the beginning of her setup though. Deadlock combos these tripwires with a barrier mesh by blocking off the attacker's entrance into halls, basically resulting in a slaughterhouse on site. Deadlock doesn't pick up any kills in this clip, but just by looking at the setup, where are the enemies supposed to go? They are absolutely slaughtered by her teammates as they scale in after being completely trapped into a corner. Take note of the tripwire's locations being placed a bit deeper into sight in spots where the enemies are likely to be running when they enter the site. Deadlock is playing a pretty passive setup right now because her whole team is very far away from her and not really in a position to help her if she gets pushed. You'll notice she's jiggling the smoke just for info, and as soon as the enemies start running in, she throws her barrier mesh on site and then dips into spawn to play off of her trips. This barrier mesh makes it so that any enemies who are pathing towards back site will not be able to swing her, giving the Deadlock an isolated gunfight on the enemy Reyna as the trap gets triggered. This allows Deadlock to pick up a free kill and then quickly dip back into spawn, waiting for her teammates for retake. This barrier mesh stalls so long in fact that as breach rotates over, everyone is clogged up back site for a massive rolling thunder. After dipping in and out of a few gunfights, Deadlock throws out Annihilation as well, grabbing the Sage out of the smoke and forcing her into such a bad position that Breach is able to get the kill even after she gets broken out. Once again, this is a round that doesn't showcase too many kills, but really highlights just how frustrating Deadlock can be to push into. A good Deadlock is able to funnel her enemies into positions that are so advantageous that they couldn't possibly lose the round even if they tried. Just because you can do these trap setups though doesn't mean that you can't play aggressively on defense as well. Because Gravnet is really good at punishing pushes, you can combo it really well at the start of rounds to help your teammates fight different areas of the map if you so choose. Notice how in this round, Deadlock combos Gravnet with her Phoenix's Molly to help them fight mid. Because of this util, it completely separates the Harbor from the rest of his team, allowing for a very early kill. Normally, you don't really want to risk losing a Sentinel early on in the round with aggressive plays like this, but in Deadlock's case, her tripwires aren't the best information in the game anyway, so it's actually not completely horrible to do something more aggressive like this. After the fight plays out in mid though, her team decides to fall back and prepare for an A retake. So she quickly throws out barrier mesh to protect as they run away, and then they flood the A site before the Viper ultimate gets time to form. Deadlock picks up a trade onto site and puts her team in a great position to win the round off the back of a pretty aggressive play in mid. Deadlock is not like Cypher, and you're not going to be able to just sit back and shoot enemies off of your tripwires. Despite having some awesome utility for creating traps, eventually you're going to have to shoot your gun, so if you're playing Deadlock, don't be afraid to fight. Before we leave you though, let's take a closer look at Annihilation and how to get the most value out of it in your rounds. We've already showcased a few rounds where Annihilation made a difference, but it is a rather difficult ultimate to use, so here are some quick tips to keep in mind. Annihilation is best used on players who are stuck in locations with no great way to get out. It basically secures a kill really easily without you needing to worry about taking a fight with them or weeding them out with another form of utility. Take a look at this clip how Deadlock uses Annihilation to grab a player who she knows is stuck on the left side. This causes the enemy team to panic and attempt to break the Phoenix out, which only results in more kills for her team. When players are stuck in corners, it basically is a guaranteed hit, and you should definitely take advantage of it. Don't try to greed and wait for the perfect opportunity. If you see an easy hit, you should normally take it. Here's another similar clip where a player who is planting spike has made for an easy hit. At the end of the day, a free kill is a free kill, so if you can take it, you probably should. This isn't the only way that you can use this ultimate though. Another way that it provides a ton of promise is using the ultimate to punish enemies for earlier round patterns. For example, here's a round where Deadlock had caught on that the enemy Killjoy liked to use her turret in window every round. Because of this, she knew exactly where Killjoy would be at the start of the round, so she pops Annihilation right away and fires it straight into window, pulling the Killjoy away from her attackers as they are spread out at the start of the round. You can see this exact same thing happening during this Pearl match after Deadlock realized Harbor would often jump peek long at the start of the round. They fire off Annihilation off the back wall, using this smoke to provide them cover, and then hook and early pick onto the Harbor while nobody is in position to help him. The better part, Deadlock only had a Bulldog in this round, so she was able to upgrade her rifle, and this grabbed Cypher a body that he was immediately able to ult for info. So yeah, that is definitely pretty cool, and it opens up the idea that you can use Annihilation on eco rounds to grab your team a rifle if you find somebody out on their own. Finally, we want to really emphasize the idea that you can bait the body of the player that you grab with the ultimate to grab more kills. Notice how in this round, Deadlock has a bit of a close call, but is able to land a hook onto the enemy raise. If you didn't know, this is how it looks when you are hooked by Deadlock. You can't see anything, so you'll see that Deadlock uses this opportunity to reposition to the other side of the room as the enemy Omen comes to free his teammate. Omen swings out, absolutely clueless to the Deadlock's reposition, making for a super free kill. Players will often tunnel on freeing their teammates during Annihilation, so take advantage of this. Finally, if you're really looking to master using Annihilation, we highly recommend checking out SkillCapped, where we've posted a full Deadlock course that not only goes in more in depth on the mechanics that we've talked about today, but we also talk about specific lineups that you can use to get picks with Annihilation during the first few seconds of your rounds. It's actually quite embarrassing to miss this ultimate, and if you don't know how to use it, it can feel really underwhelming. So if you're serious about learning Deadlock, be sure to head on over using that link below to get started on your road to Radiant. Once you've brushed up on their courses, we recommend also heading on over to our Discord, where our coaches are offering free VOD reviews for all site subscribers. This has been helping countless players climb through the ranks every single day. Our whole service is backed by rank insurance, guaranteeing that you will improve, and if you don't improve, you don't pay. This is a massive opportunity for any player to instantly start climbing in Valorant, and you don't want to miss out on this opportunity to get ahead of the curve. Mastering a new agent before everyone else gets used to playing against them can quite literally be free wins early on in the act. So start climbing today using that link in the description below, and we will see you there.